June 1969. Two countries stood on the edge of collapse. The streets were already filled with anger. The newspapers were filled with hate, and millions of people were preparing for a football match that would become one of the darkest moments in sports history. At first, it looked like a normal World Cup qualifier. Just another game. 90 minutes, one ball, two nations. But this wasn't really about football anymore. This was a Honduras versus El Salvador. Two neighboring countries carrying years of tension, poverty, political problems, and growing hatred toward each other. By the late 1960s, thousands of Salvadorans had moved into Honduras searching for work and land. But as Honduras became more unstable, anger toward immigrants started growing rapidly. Politicians blamed outsiders for economic problems. The media fueled nationalism. And slowly, people from both countries began seeing each other as enemies. Then football entered the picture. The 1970 FIFA World Cup qualifiers placed Honduras and El Salvador against each other. Suddenly, one football match carried the emotions of two entire nations, and almost immediately, things became hostile. Before the first game even started, fans gathered outside hotels during the night, screaming, shouting, throwing objects, trying to stop the opposing players from sleeping. Football had turned into psychological warfare. The first match took place in Honduras. Tens of thousands of fans packed the stadium. The atmosphere felt electric, but underneath the noise was pure tension. Honduras won the game 1-0 in the final minutes. The stadium exploded. Fans celebrated wildly. But back in El Salvador, the reaction became something much darker. Newspapers described the loss like a national tragedy. Radio stations blamed Honduras. Crowds became furious. And overnight, football became political. Days later, the second match took place in El Salvador. This time, Honduras experienced the same hostility. Their team hotel was attacked throughout the night. Fans screamed outside the windows, fireworks exploded, stones hit the building, players barely slept. By the time the match began, emotions were completely out of control. El Salvador won. The crowd erupted. Fans flooded the streets, cars burned. Violence spread rapidly, and now both countries were tied. One final match would decide who qualified for the World Cup. But by this point, the football itself barely mattered anymore. Entire nations were emotionally invested. Newspapers turned players into soldiers. Fans treated the matches like war. The final game took place in Mexico City. Neutral ground, massive pressure, millions watching. Every tackle felt personal. Every goal felt political. Every mistake felt dangerous. After extra time, El Salvador won, and that should have been the end. But instead, everything became worse. Only hours after the match, El Salvador cut diplomatic ties with Honduras. The violence exploded. Military forces crossed borders. Airplanes attacked cities. Soldiers entered combat. Civilians fled their homes. And suddenly the world was witnessing something almost impossible to believe. A real war, connected to a football rivalry. Today, it's remembered as the football war. But the truth is more complicated. Football didn't create the conflict. The anger already existed. The poverty already existed. The political tension already existed. But football became the spark. Because football has something incredibly powerful. Emotion. A single match can make millions of people feel pride, hope, anger, pain, unity. And when entire nations become emotionally consumed by one event, things can become dangerous very quickly. The war itself lasted only around 100 hours. But the damage lasted much longer. Thousands of people lost their homes. Families were destroyed. Lives changed forever. All connected, in some way, to a football match. And maybe that's what makes this story so disturbing. Because when people think about football, they think about passion, celebration, fans singing together, children dreaming of becoming heroes. Nobody expects football to become part of a war story. But sometimes sports become bigger than sports. They become identity, politics, national pride, power. And once emotions reach that level, even a game can feel like life or death. Today, the World Cup is watched by billions. Nations still celebrate victories like historic moments. Fans still cry after defeats. Rivalries still feel deeply personal. Because football was never just about football. It's about emotion, and emotion is one of the most powerful forces on Earth. Maybe that's why this story still feels unbelievable decades later, because deep down, nobody wants to believe that a football match could ever help push the world toward war. But it happened, and football history would never forget it.